Jo, thank you for joining us on Capstone's Talent Talk podcast today. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Sarah. And yeah, no, delighted to be with you and Ollie this morning.
Brilliant. So what we always start off with is maybe you can tell us a bit about your career so far, how you got to, so that we can get a feel for what underpins the career that you've got now and the success that you're experiencing now. Take us from the beginning.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sarah. So, I've got kind of 20 years of experience in the industry, and I suppose a little bit unusual in that I spent my first 15 years as a valuer. And so I valued all types of assets all across the UK, a little bit of stuff overseas too. I actually never thought I would make the move client side. And perhaps by the time you've got that amount of years of experience, people will say, or you can't move after that, you're a valuer for life. But actually, 4 years ago, I joined SEGRO, and so I've made that step client side. And so my current role is a director here at SEGRO. I have responsibility over the Thames Valley Portfolio. Slough Trading Estate is the biggest part of that. And I cover everything from kind of asset management, leasing, as well as development. So see that whole property life cycle in my current role. So yeah, a very different type of role to what I was doing for sort of 15 years.
Amazing. And how's the transition been from the consultancy side over to client side?
Yeah, it was a tricky transition, which is probably kind of no surprise. And I think mainly because there was a lot that I needed to learn, and it was sort of kind of very different processes, very different experience that actually I needed time to take to get up to speed. But also, actually, there's a really different pace, and some of that pace was actually quite difficult. And I was always used to working to kind of very tight timescales that my clients would kind of set me in that valuation world. And actually, the biggest thing client side is that I'm actually setting kind of, I suppose, or we as a company are setting those timescales, and so you're working to a very different pace, and you've got a lot more kind of control about it. But so I suppose actually kind of a little bit more relaxed as part of that. And when you're kind of client side and managing a portfolio like SEGRO's Thames Valley portfolio, there's lots to do, and there's always lots to do, and you've just got to work through that and work through that asset management or that development and that leasing that needs to happen.
Yeah, the to-do list is never fully ticked off, is it? Ever.
No, never. And it's always growing. But I love that. And I suppose the other bit that's great about kind of client side is that you're actually physically dealing with the properties that you are involved with. And you can see what's happening. And sometimes that can be kind of negative as much as kind of positive, but you're living and breathing it, and you're making those decisions that will kind of change that portfolio or move it forward, which is really nice.
And so
Particularly with the
how did,
trading, particularly with the trading estate there, I can just see that to-do list, there's such a variety, isn't there? There's such a scale there that
yeah no
there's always a lot to kind of manage.
Exactly, Ollie, and the scale of the trading estate. So it's sort of 425 acres, and you're absolutely right, Ollie. It's got a massive breadth of different users with on there, different kind of types. So it's not just industrial, but it's also data centers. So it is the second globally largest cluster of data centers, and we have 31 of those. But we've also got kind of retail units, trade counters, we've got some offices, so a really wide-ranging portfolio. And Ollie, you're right, there is constantly always something to do on the trading estate, and it keeps kind of my team very busy, kind of keeping that all going.
But for those people listening who are thinking, well, how do you transition from consultancy side to client side? Maybe you can share how that came about, because I know that's the pinnacle for a lot of people. They want to go client side. So maybe you can talk about the reality of that and how you got to that point.
Yeah, and I suppose I was very fortunate. I was valuing for SEGRO, and I was valuing this Slough Trading Estate when actually SEGRO approached me, which is always a really lovely way of those things to happen. But actually, I had to really kind of question. I actually didn't think I was probably capable of doing the job, because there was lots that it seemed a really wide role, and I thought, gosh, there's lots on there that I haven't done before. And I got some really great advice actually from some people at SEGRO that were hiring me, around, actually it was such a wide role that probably no person would be able to tick every box. And it really was about thinking about, well, what are the transferable skills? And things like, the role talked about customer management. So all of our tenants are customers at SEGRO, and customer management. Well, I'd obviously done client management and business development in a consultancy piece. And that's exactly the same skill set. It's just different people that you're sort of doing that with. So it's those, and I suppose that a large part of my role is also managing a team. I've got a team of 9 that sort of report through to me. Again, I mean, you manage a team doing whatever the role is, and those skills that you have are totally transferable. So often I think it's thinking that little bit wider than just the immediate piece of exactly what you're doing day in and day out, and what are those skills actually that you have that are exactly the same regardless of whether you're consultancy or client side.
Yeah, and I suppose as your customer when you were at CBRE, then they will know how you deal with now your customers at SEGRO in terms of the tenants that you're working with now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
who are those tenants generally? I mean, obviously you've got 31 data centers, but beyond that, are you are you dealing with a really wide range of tenants?
Yeah, we are, myself and the team are, and I suppose we kind of the Slough Trading Estate is probably one of the most diverse portfolios within SEGRO. So we have units as small as sort of 500 square feet, so the size of a garage, through to sort of 100,000 square foot kind of plus units. It's very much what we call kind of centered around our urban portfolio. So we can have lots of SMEs, and businesses that are just individually run, at the very small end, through to kind of global businesses operating. It might be their HQ, or it might be their sort of kind of southeast base. So customers, one of the things that we're actually quite proud of on the Slough Trading Estate is obviously our history. So it's been there for 105 years now, and some of our customers have been with us since the very start, which is just incredible that they are.
Really?
Yeah, they are generally in different buildings, apart from Mars. So obviously, the Mars bar was created on the Slough Trading Estate, and Mars are still in the same buildings today as they were when they started on the estate in 1932, which is just incredible that you have this history and heritage that also kind of comes as part of it.
That's not usually associated. History and heritage is not usually associated with Slough. So
No, quite,
there we
and
go.
exactly, and there's lots I've learned about Slough, and far more than I ever thought I would learn about it. And it actually is quite an incredible place in terms of things that were created there. So the Ford GT40 was created on the estate, and then a slightly more modern one, not on the estate, but the wheelie bin was created in Slough, would you believe?
There you go. Who knew?
And my colleague Rob Joslin and I, we were fortunate to have a tour of the estate not long ago, and I think we were taken past the first original tenant, and from 1925, whatever it was, and interesting that they've evolved. So I guess there's obviously a natural sort of evolution of those businesses on the estate too. And I think now they do something to do with ultraviolet water treatment, which I'm imagining wasn't a thing 105 years ago. So it's just interesting how not only do they stay with you, but they evolve as businesses, which is great.
Yeah, and that evolution is super important, right? And the estate kind of continues to evolve. And you're right, Hanovia are the customer that, yeah, have kind of been with us since kind of 1920. And yeah, we've sort of moved them around different buildings. And yeah, they're kind of, their kind of processes kind of change. And I suppose that's kind of a little bit like data centers, that actually, sort of data centers have only really been on the estate for kind of the last 20 years since the first one was there. And that very much started with them occupying industrial space, and then of course over time that's really changed, and we're now purpose built multi-story data centers, kind of shell and core for it's mainly the co-locators that we have on the trading estate, and we're now sort of building those buildings for them. So that evolution is super important for the estate to kind of keep making sure it's got its place, and we're creating kind of, really the best buildings out there to host what business needs.
And given the sort of timeframes involved in data center construction, for example, have you noticed over the past few years the your clients that you're working with there that are going to be taking that space? Has there been any shifts in priorities, or have you seen that? Because that's obviously evolving at such a pace as well, but equally the timeframes are relatively long in terms of actually getting operational. So yeah, have you found, is there anything interesting happening there?
Yeah, and you're right, Ollie. I mean, kind of we can build actually kind of the shell pretty quick,
Mm,
sort of 12, 15 months, and we can kind of get that up. But then, of course, a really long fit out period for the data centers, normally much longer than the construction period. And of course, where a lot of capital comes in terms of that fit
mm,
out as well. But I suppose in terms of trends, certainly something that we're seeing is, I suppose, that demand for kind of larger and larger facilities. Some of the first, what I would kind of call the sort of first iteration of what we had on the estate, were very small data center operations in sort of industrial type units. And obviously, actually, something that now is bespoke and has the right floor loading on kind of multi levels, and actually is configured in a way for it to suit the operation that they wish to put in there, is really, really important. It will be different on which customer you're talking to in terms of exactly what that design looks like. So we make sure that actually that all of our data centers are pre-let, and that obviously enables us to have those discussions and make sure that design is right for them, that it is going to suit their operation.
yeah, interesting. And with regards to, I don't know, I guess things like ESG and net zero and all that sort of stuff with data centers is clearly, there's quite a lot happening there. And yeah, I mean, I noticed when we were there, there's various considerations given to that, which is quite interesting. How are you finding that side of things too?
Yeah, and it's sort of, look, the ESG side of things is super important and like right at the core of SEGRO's strategy for responsible SEGRO. And actually we were one of the first to insist on green lease clauses for the data centers. And kind of goes around two things. One is providing data to us so that we're kind of clear on sort of kind of energy usage. But two, that they are procuring kind of green energy contracts. Now, actually, most of the data center providers, if not all of them, are actually already signed up, and they all want to corporately kind of be doing that anyway and are
Mm,
committing to doing that. So that wasn't really a problem, but we just wanted to make sure that was very clear in our leases that we were committed to ensuring that kind of green energy as part of that.
yeah, you set a bit of a benchmark then, don't you, across the estate, which is great.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
If we think about the career that you've had, and this is one of the two questions that we have pre-prepared, as it were. I'm always a big believer, Joe, that there are moments in our career. Sometimes we don't know it until the moment's gone, or people in our career, and again, we might not know that until the moment has passed and we're reflecting back on the career. But that there are some really influential moments. Has there been an influential person or period in your career that has really shaped or got you to where you are now, or shapes how you operate now as a leader or in the space that you're in?
Um, Probably nothing kind of significant that I could kind of say as one thing, but I suppose it's a collection of various different elements. And you're right, Sarah. Sometimes you realise kind of things at the time, or sometimes that's afterwards. I would kind of say one of the things that I am is pretty resilient, and kind of resilient, whether that be sort of, tough moments that you're sort of kind of put under, or, you're kind of navigating change that comes through, and how you're resilient to that. And I think, that dealing with difficult situations, that I can certainly kind of pinpoint what in my previous role, valuing shopping centres during the worst performance of retail, and having to go in and talk to boards and audit committees about why you've taken 50% off in the last year off some shopping centre assets. It's quite tough, and you sort of form quite a lot of resilience around how do you deal with that, and how do you kind of deliver that, and you then realise actually you've kind of got quite a good skill set to be able to kind of go in and deal with those difficult situations, and kind of go and explain, and I think kind of another side to that, I suppose, that period of my career that kind of has helped me is that non-execs will always ask you a question that you've never prepared for, or something that you're not quite expecting, and how do you deal with that, and how can you be kind of quite in the moment and fluid with how you respond to some of that.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, because I think when you're in that moment, you're like, oh my God, I've been completely unprepared, but that's all part of it. That's how you
Yeah.
become prepared next time, and
And
build that.
I think you also start to realize, this is where people are different, and that's brilliant. You want a diverse range of people kind of within the industry, of course. You will have people that will want to prepare more and want to have everything written down and so forth. And I'm not necessarily one of those. And perhaps an area where it's always good for me to continue to work on is making sure I do prepare ahead of kind of difficult meetings, or something you're not quite sure where it's going to go. Although at least it doesn't bother me when someone sort of asks me a question, I have to think a little bit on the hoof. But yeah, I think it's kind of recognizing, well, which side do I sit, and therefore what preparation do I need to do, and how do I
Right.
get myself comfortable?
Yeah, if you're an expert in what you know, then you've got to have that human element as well, haven't you?
Yeah. And also, let's face it, I mean, there's nothing wrong with kind of saying, I'm really sorry, but I don't know that. Let me take that away, or we'll come back to you on that. And you don't always have to have all the answers.
Right.
And you're heavily involved in the early careers program at SEGRO as well, aren't you? How have you found that? And have you found there's some interesting things that have come out of that in terms of younger people coming in and their priorities or mindsets, or how that might be sort of shifting or changing things, beyond that program and maybe further up the tree, or how are you finding that?
Yeah, and I sort of kind of co-ran our early careers kind of program here for sort of 3 or 4 years at SEGRO. And during that time, actually, for the first time in SEGRO's history, we kind of opened our grad scheme up to non-cogs, so those without a real estate degree. And we've supported and funded those that come in then to go and undertake a master's whilst working with us. Now that's not new for the industry, and lots of companies have been doing that for quite some time, and obviously kind of bringing apprentices through and so forth. And I think there's some exceptional talent that's coming into the real estate industry by actually sort of opening that up, whether that via apprenticeships or that kind of non-cognate route. And yeah, we've got the kind of the graduates that have kind of come through since we've done that. We've got a really nice range, and I suppose I go back to that point that you want actually a really diverse set of people that will think in different ways or approach things in different ways. And within SEGRO, we've got a lot of different roles, whether that be on the development side or the asset management side, or leasing. And you need different people to be doing that, because it isn't going to naturally suit everyone.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about, I mean, specifically, I suppose, if you relate it back to kind of the data center sector, but I suppose more broadly than that, that kind of wider education piece, in the public around actually what those sorts of careers can look like, or actually if there is even a career available there, and actually making that pathway perhaps a little bit more, transparent and clear is going to help us to attract, a wider pool of people.
Exactly, and lots of organisations are doing that, whether that be sort of the RICS, or whether that
Mm.
be sort of individual companies with the work that they do alongside schools. And here at SEGRO, we've also got a schools program. Now that is a little bit more around actually ensuring that the likes of jobs that are on the Slough Trading Estate are well known to sort of kind of local kind of school pupils, so that they understand. And lots of that is also around data centres. And I think for a long time, data centres has been quite closed, quite small, kind of not much known about that, and kind of very few people that actually kind of work in the world of data centres. And so part of actually our schools program locally is to make sure that actually those at school understand. And it's not just the pupils, it's also actually sometimes around thinking that their parents understand what that is, because it can be quite a common misconception that, that data centers don't employ anyone. They can just, operate by themselves, and it's all to do with the data that goes between them. Well, of course, that's not the case. And, there's a whole range of jobs, and whether that kind of exactly the same as it would be for any company, whether that's HR or finance, they're still needed within there, but also some really technical roles, sort of around the engineering side, and technical design. And I think, data centers has made quite a bit of progress in terms of more people going into it. It's more talked about, which I think is good. More people understand what that means, even though there's sometimes a little bit of a different language to other kind of real estate sectors. And we're seeing then lots more people kind of going into it. And I hope that through our schools program, actually, we'll start to sort of see more and more local people also understand the opportunity that sits there in the future.
Yeah, and everything that's bringing to the local economy and beyond that. But it feels like, we're at that not an inflection point, but because of that, the rapid advance of AI and everything like that, and how that's then, forming some of the evolution of design and so on and so forth. It's getting more airtime, isn't it? And we're talking about it now, and you see it a bit more in the media. And so, through all of these programs and outreach and conversations that we're having, hopefully it starts to filter through, and those the younger generation now will start to have a bit more kind of awareness of that, and actually
Yeah.
see that as a pathway. But even beyond that, because if it's linked to industrial logistics or whatever it might be, then there's hopefully there's that wider pool of people that can come into real estate.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, also the location of data centers, I suppose, historically kind of started kind of in the Docklands. Slough has
Mm,
become, sort of one of the prime availability zones, that kind of is there. But of course, with the likes of AI coming through, and some really incredibly kind of sized facilities that are supposedly going to be demanded, they're also going to travel out to different parts of the UK as well. So, we've seen sort of Microsoft and others sort of purchase land in the northeast and think about,
mm.
big campuses kind of elsewhere. So it will also kind of move that around geographically in the UK as well.
It's quite cutting edge, isn't it? Which you don't necessarily always associate with real estate in some respects.
Yeah. Although I suppose, different parts of operational real estate that in the
True,
last kind of,
true.
10, 20 years have kind of, come about, and new sectors that were sort of never there before. So perhaps we're more used to it in real estate than we think.
Mm.
And then the next new big thing comes along, we're like, oh, well, this hasn't happened before. But actually it has. And, you think about experts that have, kind of come in around student accommodation, around kind of BTR from a residential perspective, or operational hotels. There's so many different examples. Self-storage, another one that just didn't really exist before, and
Mm.
and now there's lots of experts out there that have really deep knowledge on these sectors, and it's kind of growing in that sense.
How did you find the transition from, whether it be shopping centre valuation or broader retail and commercial assets, the actual shift? Because a lot of what we do through with Capstone is, really trying to support more diverse talent into all of the industries that we support, but in this case, especially data centers, because there's so much more talent needed and the pool isn't there, and it's only going to be retiring sooner than many of the asset classes that we're working within. So how did you find the transition from a non-data center biased portfolio into one with a heavy data center? What are kind of the key differences, or was it smoother than you thought, or were there challenges there?
Um, it's probably not something that I really thought about at the time, and perhaps that was helpful, so that you kind of weren't worrying, oh, I don't know anything about this, and you sort of just kind of went with it. Um, I suppose it's probably been quite helpful that over my career I've done a real range of sectors and a whole range of geographies kind of across the UK. So you're used to actually sort of switching things up. Um, and actually, real estate isn't that difficult. It kind of comes down to some sort of basics that are sort of always there. And so I therefore think there's a lot of kind of commonality to kind of what's there, that it might be a slightly different asset class, but actually the principles are kind of are still the same. But I think data centers, I suppose, is a little trickier. I talked earlier about that different language. Understanding the power side of things is super, super important, and all of that's sort of brand new. And so I suppose a few things, be prepared to go and do some background kind of reading and research to sort of understand it. What are the bits that you don't understand? Not be afraid to ask questions about it as something that you don't know, or try to find out, well, who could I go and talk to about that, or where could I kind of go and learn that, and then be prepared to kind of go on that learning to understand it. And I probably would also say, time's great as well, isn't it? Just a bit of time spent around it, absorbing kind of what's going on, and just allowing you sort of just that sponge to soak up what's going on and take it all in.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a building is a building. There are obviously nuances around, location and various other things. But it's good to hear because, we have to open our minds to kind of different backgrounds in order to, supply the talent to the industry, really.
Yeah, and I think, for me, that's where it then comes back to sort of the type of person that you've got, and is that candidate a good match for your business? Actually, the skill set that they have, and the way in which they want to learn or kind of apply things, and there could well be other characteristics they have you don't have anywhere else. And
Yeah.
yes, they might be missing some of that kind of deep kind of sector knowledge on a real specific, but quite often lots of that can kind of be learned super quickly. And actually people then spending time to kind of share that experience and share that knowledge then helps that wider pool actually kind of upskill.
Yeah. And actually it's the skills like your resilience that you've built through yours, and that adaptability that's probably going to be more important in those moments. Okay, so in your view, what are you most excited about over the next 5 years for the data center industry in particular, Joe?
I suppose it's kind of seeing where this demand goes, and kind of AI, and how does that kind of really change the demand side of things, and how is supply going to kind of keep up? We've got quite a lot of development to do, and I'm excited about kind of doing that development and seeing that development through, and seeing kind of what we produce. And I'm sure over a 5-year time period things will change, because the speed of change seems pretty fast at the moment, and I can't see that slowing. I mean, there's some important power upgrades to come through, certainly in
Yeah.
sort of kind of the Slough market, and that will come through over that kind of time period as well. So it'd be really exciting to kind of see all of that come through, and then see kind of where we're at. And I just really hope that, as I said, Slough is the second largest cluster globally of data centers. I don't think there's any chance we'll become first behind Ashburn, Virginia, but it would be great to kind of see that retains its second position over that time.
And are
Well,
you
having been,
guys involved in much on the power side? Because obviously that's such a prohibitive or facilitating factor.
Yeah, we are, and I suppose as you'd expect us to be. And I kind of can't say too much because it's all kind of quite sensitive information.
Of course.
But yeah, we will be bringing additional power kind of through to Slough, as lots of other people are locally, because we've got a really big development pipeline, and so we're bringing some of that from Uxbridge Moor as and when that kind of comes online. But as you say, Sarah, the power is such a big thing. We talk about data centers kind of needing three things: power, planning, and land. And we do have some power. We want to bring more power through, and we obviously got the land at Slough, that's for sure. And the other bit, I mean, that we are super pleased about is our continuing partnership with Slough Borough Council in terms of our simplified planning zone that we've got on the trading estate. So that enables us to be able to develop data centres or industrial without the need for permission. So the fact we've got our SPZ for the next 10 years is essentially our planning permission. So we don't have to go through that quite long and laborious task of getting planning, which is brilliant.
Absolutely.
yeah, it's great. I mean, having been down there's so many great things happening. It is exciting. You sort of look forward to the next 5 years. I mean, plus, but and just actually how vital that is to all of us.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's
I mean,
a lot of good work happening there.
I suspect this podcast is going via probably
Yeah,
one of our data centers on Slough kind of right now. So yeah, I mean it's vital. Otherwise, we just wouldn't be able to do things like this.
Yeah, I've loved hearing about how you've transitioned, not just into data centers, but how you've transitioned from from a pretty niche valuation role into such a broad remit over at
Yeah.
SEGRO, and as well as a broad portfolio, and and what's got you there. So thank you so much for sharing all of your experience and insights with us, Joe. It's been brilliant to hear.
thank you,
Good.
Joe.
Well, thank you both for having me. It's been good to kind of chat all that through.